the rest all on June. Yes. So Catherine, you give us a cue when it's starting. 没关系，你什么时候开始？我们要开始了。Okay, we're going to start. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Yugambeh people, the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, and pay my respect to their elders past, present, and emerging, and all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people here today. Thank you, Helen Morris, for allowing us the space at New Life Church, and Jules Stephanie for your time volunteering this 5-lesson series with us. We are very grateful to be organizing these learning opportunities, specifically on how to support the community in welcoming new migrants into their settlement. Our planned schedule today begin with part 1 and break for 10 minutes, then continue for part 2 and finishing with a Q&A for 10 minutes. With that in mind, we plan to finish at 2:30 p.m. So, without further ado, we'll start lesson 1, how to welcome a new migrant with Jewel.
Thank you very much for your warm welcome. I'd like to say it's a privilege for me to come and talk to you ladies and to share a little bit about what I've been doing over the course of my life, but also how we can help you settle into the Australian culture. First of all, I've been school teaching with primary age children up to about 13 years of age for over 40 years. So I love children, I love the interaction with their parents, and I've really enjoyed the last 10 years before I retired. I was in a management role, so a lot of the time was liaising with parents and helping them in problems or in questions to help support them in some aspect of their education. Originally I lived in New Zealand, and while I was there, I've shared with some of the ladies, I worked with quite a few different Chinese communities who were international students who came in to observe the culture, further their English, and to just have a really positive experience in the Western style of education and have lots of fun along the way too. So we all know that when you get to 12 and 13 and 14, having fun is a lot about what they like to do. So yes, we worked with the Chinese students from China, and also we had groups come from South Korea. So we had quite a lot of the mothers would come alongside the group, and every morning we would have lessons in English and classroom study, and then in the afternoon we would go out and see tourist spots. If they came in the summer, we'd go swimming, go to the beach, do all the fun things that kids their age like to do. So lots of interesting cross-culture, because we can learn from them and they can learn from us. And I know that's what we've learned from some of you, because you have a lot to offer us, not just us offering to you. So in thinking about how you can settle positively into the Australian culture, we do welcome you. And what I have suggested is that you might find us Western people, New Zealanders, Australians, we love to enjoy life. So as in other Western countries, many people here, you will notice just in your observation, they have a philosophy, don't worry, be happy. And so I think that's probably hard for you to understand sometimes, because people just seem to go through life having a good time. Oh yes, I work hard when I go to work, but now I'm home, I'm just going to sit back and watch the TV, do all sorts of activities with the children. But unfortunately, that makes it harder for you to settle into the culture because you're not quite sure of the expectations for your teenagers, for your children, or for you yourselves in an adult society. So the general direction that we'd like to be able to point you is some positive things that we've found. Helen and I have both travelled overseas, and when we went to Europe particularly, we were on your side where we didn't know their language, and so we understand often that means the settling in process is quite tricky, and you do have to sort of learn by just absorbing what you can. So sometimes I really feel I should say you may feel people are a little bit unfriendly and they're not really very open, but unfortunately that's just part of our reserve in who we are as people. So please don't see it as unfriendliness. If anything, I'm thinking of my area where I live, it's more busyness. People get so busy and they're flying out the door to go to work, or then they've got to take their children to sport. And so keep greeting your neighbours, keep building friendships, and even if it's hi and bye for a lot of time, eventually you'll be able to catch them and ask them a question, something maybe quite simple. Even for us, some of the first things you do when you go to a new neighbourhood is, what day does the rubbish go out? And how many times a month does the recycling bin get collected? So we have to do that too, even when we move to a different house or location. And then if you want advice, the kinds of things that we share as women is, who's your hairdresser, or who do you recommend for me to go for my hairstyling? And you may already have a hairdresser, but it's good to know what they think. So think of things like that, which will open a little door, and they might share something with you, and eventually we hope they'll invite you for a cup of coffee and you'll be able to talk and get to ask them more questions. But keep your questions so that when these opportunities arise, you'll know that you can go ahead and help them all you can. A funny little story is, over the road from me, I've been in a new house for 2 years. So we've got to know the lady across the road, and I never see her because she lifts the garage up, pulls her car out, garage comes down and off she goes. So I never see her. But eventually we met her, I think, over the mailbox or putting the trash out, and we found out she lived alone. And the amazing thing is, I should have said to you, my husband's American, so he's very friendly. He talks to everybody. But between him and myself, we got to know that Jacqueline is French. And that's how she says her name, Jacqueline. And she's got quite a French vibe in her conversation. And so she invited us for drinks, and we went to her house, and then we had her over for coffee. And so then I found out, I invited her to come to something, and she said, I don't even get going, she's a little bit older, I don't get going in the morning till about 10 o'clock. So she couldn't do something at 10 o'clock because she goes to bed late, where we go to bed early and we get up early. So you learn things about people, and she's been very, very sweet. She would help us out, particularly we have a little dog. So if I needed her to keep an eye out, and if he ever runs away, she'd be able to help me with that. But twice she got caught because we had a little power outage. It only lasted about an hour, but the power was completely cut off. So she came running over, and she was due at her hairdresser, and the lady comes from Brisbane. She only comes, and she only gets her hair coloured and cut and everything like every 2 months. And she says, Jewel, I'm in a real bind. And that meant she didn't know what to do because she was going to miss her appointment. So I said, look, I've got my car here, I'll take you. And she was just so relieved. And then it happened again very recently, and my husband was home. So he went over, he knew how to put something in the garage door opener and to help her out. So those kinds of things, if you ask a neighbour or you even get to say hi every so often, eventually you'll be able to pick who's going to be friendly. I've got another neighbour who all it is hi, and that's all we do because they seem like they don't want to be friendly. So you'll find things out as you go. If you do have a pet, often it's a good way to start conversations too. Yeah, so you get to know people as you go. So asking an opinion or even their advice is always a good thing to keep in mind. I've said here that this can apply at your school. Now I know school is very different, especially if you go to a college that it's drop-off, pick-up, drop-off, pick-up. But if you can, even park a little bit away and walk down and arrange to meet your students at a drop-off point or by the crossing or something like that, you find out a lot of information from families at the school crossing or at the school gate. So don't think, oh, this is very strange, but just do it a few times, see how it goes, and you might once again, you may have to be the proactive one and say, have you ever been to an event at the school here? Do I need to arrive half an hour early? You know, say there was a concert at night. Just ask a sort of a question that will open the door for them to share something. Or you might say, have you got any children that is learning a musical instrument? And say, what have you found the lessons to be like? My daughter has just started her children at King's College. And so her son is going to be in the basketball and he's going to do rugby as well. So because he's a growing 12-year-old, he needs lots of exercise. So they've signed him up, paid the fees, and they're getting to know people. Every Friday night, they've invited us to go and watch the game. It's a big commitment for you as parents to go to drop the children early at school, especially when you've got 2 or 3, because she's finding that. She sometimes brings our little granddaughter over and we take her later. Or they'll go and have a hot chocolate at McDonald's or something because they've had to take him to basketball practices. So yeah, use the school opportunity as much as you can because that way you'll get to know their friends. I won't jump ahead of myself because I'm going to talk about school holidays a little bit later. Yeah, so people don't think through that they're helping you out, but once you ask, it slows them down enough to think, oh yes, if I was in that situation, I'd like to know that sort of information too. So quite a little bit of perseverance and effort will help you get to know some of those families, and you'll be amazed where that will lead because, for example, even if you've got a swimming pool on the Gold Coast here, they might invite you to have your student swim at their pool. And so you can say, would it be all right if I come too? Because I'd like to meet you. Or you can say, you'll get to feel whether they just want you to drop your student off. But when they offer that sort of hand of friendship, it's quite good to take them up. And then if you do that once and you see the pool's a good size, you don't be afraid. They will not be offended if you say to them, can I bring my other child? Like the first time it might be just the one child because that's who the friendship's with. But if you want to do things like that, that is not considered rude at all. So please, you know, feel that you've got that openness to talk to people. Family dynamics are very different with every family, just as I'm sure you find in your society. The thing that we as Westerners or Australians like to admire you for is we see your children and yourselves to one another. You're highly respectful and you do show honour to one another. And we think that is such an important quality. But it's something that we, probably because the kids watch a lot of television from America, they get very casual and they get quite, in a school teacher's terms, almost sloppy. And so they don't show a lot of respect. When we have a child come to play and they say, "Hello, Mrs. Stephanie," you almost think, wow, that was so polite that they said that, because parents don't foster those sort of manners. So when we see you offering your kids to offer those sort of things, we really like really like to encourage it in our own home. So it's up to the parents to instruct and instill good behaviour. And what I've said in the notes, everyone agrees to this, we all think it's great, but where there has been in Western society a real breakdown is where there is a split home. Mostly it's single mums, but it can be a single dad who is in charge of the children, depending on the agreement they've got through the courts. So those sort of homes, often the mother can be struggling just to get the kids to school, get the baby to daycare or the preschooler, and then she's always in quite a rush. So those sort of situations do exist, and we try to support, especially if you're in a church community, we want to support those sort of parents all we can. And I haven't really put this down, but with you, many of you, we admire the fact that you're here with your children, and sometimes your husband's partners are overseas in business. So we know you've got a full-time load, just keeping things happy and keeping things buzzing along. Behaviour models, it is quite, if I use the word affronting, it's almost embarrassing for us if we see parents yelling at their children. If you're in the shopping mall and you hear a mother or a father really almost screaming at their children, to us that is not the way it should be done. But the only excuse I can give is the fact that they are under extreme pressure, lots of stress in that home. And so once again, even now that I'm a grandmother, you want to be able to support your kids as you can, but try to tell them don't take too much on. Like, it's great to have clubs, it's great to have music tuition, it's great to have sport, but don't do so much that you feel like you're on such a tight string almost, that it's upsetting the balance of peace and order in your house. So one of the big contentions, and you probably face this even if you were in Taiwan, is that the computer, the iPad, the phone and the game machines, the Xbox, occupy the kids quietly, but that needs to be in balance. And I know it's very easy for me to say it because it's not my children, even if it's my grandchildren, but sometimes I think Australian children have too much time on their devices. And one thing I've admired with my daughter, she's actually a school teacher too, but she restricts the use of those machines, even the iPad that comes home from school. Firstly, homework, so it's fine to use the iPad and the computer for homework, but then games on the phone, they know, her son and daughter know, they're allowed Friday night to Monday morning, they're a lot more relaxed, so they'd have more time doing all those things. If there's a midweek situation where they've done their homework, they've worked hard, they've had tests at school, she might say 1 hour. 1 hour on the game machines is a good balance. But please do not think we like to see our children, our grandchildren on devices too much. If you talk to Helen, I don't think her grandchildren that are in Australia even watch a television. Yeah, so different homes, different standards, but please keep up what you're doing because we deeply admire the fact that your children study. Don't let down on your family practices just to fit in to the Australian way. because we admire commitment and dedication to education. And then in the holidays, things can be a lot more relaxed, and in the weekends. So that ultimately leads to study habits, good scores in tests, and they're preparing for more advanced work in college and university. Helps them to secure places in university when they've got that background. And just observing my grandson's first year in what here is considered high school, so he's just starting out, but he was telling me this morning they stayed overnight at my house, and he said, I've got a maths test coming up, and I've got an assessment and this coming up. So it's like he is very gently being led into the situation where he's got to be a lot more independent, and he's got to be aware of what's going on. If you can, they probably will say they've been to the school library and got books to read, and there's a set book for their English curriculum that they need to read. But if you find they're a good reader and their grasp in English is growing really well, get them to go to the school library, or else you organise with them. If you haven't got a library card, it really pays to get one. I've got a library card, even though I don't use it a whole lot. I do quite a lot of my reading of novels on my iPad, but I still need that library card, and I get free access to many, many books on many, many subjects by having the library card. So you can get a library card for yourselves, and you can get one for your children, and then they can get books out too. And it's quite often, even once a week or once every 2 weeks, a good idea to be able to go to the library and even tell them ahead, we're going to be here for about an hour. So whether they are reading a book on space and how man got put on the moon, or whether they're reading a novel that they've found an author that they really like. And don't worry, because their English is still getting strong, if they read quite a simple book, because that's reinforcing for them their English and their grammar, their word skills. So I'm very grateful that my 2 older grandchildren have got strong in reading, and that's my forte. I love to see children getting their alphabet, getting their strength in their reading skills, because yes, if they've got a maths bent, maths will take over eventually and they'll still be able to do both. But I love to see children who are strong in their reading. And like I just said, they'll get favourite authors. Don't worry if they're reading comic books sometimes, books that are written like that, because it all is keeping them in books. And what now, as grandmothers and nanas, we are so sad about is that they just don't read. They read a little bit, and it's like, a paper book is really quite important, so they get that at school. But sometimes you might even need to say, right, we're going to read for 20 minutes every night, read for 20 minutes, and then once again the weekends you can relax. But reading is so important, and as a teacher and an educator, that's what I always advise to parents. There's lots of information they get from Google, of course, but once again, ask the ladies at the library if you can't find what you want, because they are really helpful, and they'll direct you to where you might want to get things, what on different subjects. I really want to encourage you to be keeping an eye on what they're watching. I would give this talk to any school, any group of parents. I heard a very sad situation that just happened in America, where a young person, an early teenager, got led into a chat room. That led into drugs, and he was given barbiturates, which is a doctor-prescribed type of medicine, and he died. His mother was devastated. It was so terrible. That might be an exception, but they can get into bad situations. Girls might be getting approached by men that you don't want. So just always be very aware of who they're talking to. And I know you've got the common sense in the school situation, and you're very blessed if your children are in a private school, because there is a bit more protection in that direction about who their friends are. but all my life I taught in the public school, so I'm not against the public school as well, because it teaches them to stand up for their values, and it teaches them to be able to say, no, I'm not going there, or no, I'm not doing that. And that's how we would train our children. So, just to finish off this first part of the session, session one, if you can have your children in youth groups or clubs, the churches all offer youth groups and clubs. I even heard on the Christian radio the other day a big music extravaganza program that's happening at Glow Church, a local church, and it's open to anyone who wants to just go online to their church and get a free ticket. So yes, they can be in a local youth group, but there are big events organised too, which they can go to, even if you don't go to that church. So you don't have to feel you're getting locked into something, but just keep an ear out, because that way, when other young people say they're going to a rock concert and there might be drugs there and it's not a safe situation, if they've been to some big music festivals with churches, that is a great way to keep them in a good situation. And extra sport, extra training, those are all great things for the young people to build friendships and for you to be able to get interaction with families. My grandson I've referred to a few times, he goes to his basketball game on a Friday night, and we just know they leave the game immediately after his game's finished, where a lot of families might go to McDonald's or to a restaurant. They know his youth group starts within half an hour of his game. So they've just committed to that on Friday nights, and he loves it because he's with all his mates. So then sometimes they just go to the mall and have some nice food, get some sushi or something like that, and then they pick him up an hour and a half, 2 hours later. So when we come back, I'll talk about some of the situations and groups you could be part of to help build the Kiwi or Australian culture into your lives. Thank you.